You ever wonder how far you can push someone before the nice girl everyone knows cracks right down the middle and never comes back together? My name is Lena Carter, and this is the reason my twin sister no longer has a wedding ring, a husband, or a future that looks anything like the one she stole from me. If you stay until the end, you will hear the sound a perfect life makes when it snaps. Smash that subscribe button if you are ready and let us dive in. I was 28 the morning Mom called to say Claire had mailed thick ivory invitations to the entire family, plus half of our small Ohio town, stamped for the exact Saturday Josh and I had mailed ours 3 weeks earlier. Same church, same reception barn, same 4:30 sunset slot. Claire even copied my dusty rose color scheme. Only she dyed it blush so she could swear she never noticed mine. I laughed when Mom read the date out loud, because twins share everything, right? Then I looked at Josh, and his face told me this was not a coincidence. This was war and lace. People say identical twins feel each other's pain. They do not tell you we can also plot each other's doom with surgical precision because we know every scar, every lie, every secret that still wakes us at 3 a.m. Claire knew I had spent 18 months planning that date, that I had booked photographer, caterer, florist, and a vintage string quartet while she was still posting beach selfies with the guy she claimed was just a friend from spin class. She also knew Josh's leave from Fort Hood only stretched through that exact weekend before his next deployment. If she hijacked the calendar, guests would have to pick one ceremony, and blood is thicker than invitation cardstock. Our relatives would choose the daughter who never disappointed them, the one who still lived in our childhood zip code and brought Mom flowers every Sunday. I was the daughter who moved to Nashville, dyed her hair slate black, and sent postcards instead of showing up. I never thought Claire would weaponize that. I told myself I would not cry in front of Josh. He was already lacing his boots tighter than usual, the way he does when he wants to punch a wall, but ranks forbid it. Instead, he said, "Babe, we elope. Vegas tomorrow. I will call the chaplain." And for one shimmering minute, I pictured us sliding rings across a plastic blackjack table free. Then I pictured my dad walking Claire down the aisle while I watched on somebody's Instagram story, and the shimmer curdled. I am not built to lose quietly. I kissed Josh and said, "Give me 1 week. Trust me." He did. That was his first mistake. Mine was believing I could keep the plan small. Claire and I were born 7 minutes apart, but those 7 minutes feel like centuries when you are the younger twin. She talked first, walked first, kissed first. She also learned apology first, because teachers always made me accept the sorry I never wanted. By high school, she was slipping my diary to her friends so they could dramatic read my poems about suicide and sex and God. When I confronted her, she blinked wet eyes and said, "I just wanted them to understand you like I do." Mom called that empathy. I called it target practice. I moved out the week I turned 18 and swore the next time. Claire pulled something I would not slam a door. I would slam a life. I drove home to Millfield on a Tuesday. So quiet the corn looked like it was holding its breath. Dad met me on the porch, with that hug that lifts you off the ground. Like you are 6 again. And for a second I almost turned around. Then Mom stepped outside wiping her hands, on the dish towel printed with tiny wedding cakes, and I knew Claire had already sold them the story that I was upset over nothing. Mom said, "Honey, your sister did not mean to overshadow you. We will figure it out." I smiled the way a shark smiles when it shows you every tooth before it bites. I said, "Sure, Mom, we will figure it out." Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon, and the lemon polish Claire uses to erase evidence. She had moved the living room furniture so the piano faced the window, exactly the way I liked it when we were kids, a peace offering, or a mirror for her victory. Upstairs, our old bedroom had been turned into wedding central. Stacks of blush favors, ribbon spools, a dry erase board listing vendors, timelines, emergency contacts. My side of the room was bare except for one box labeled Lena, Misk, like somebody had swept my existence into a shoebox. I opened it and found the Barbie we used to fight over, her head shaved, mine still wearing the homemade paper wig I glued the night Claire hacked her off. She kept trophies. I took the Barbie and snapped her legs at the hips, 1, 2, like wishbones. I left the pieces on her pillow. "Message received, sis." That night I met my best friend Marisol at the Rusty Tap, the only bar in town that does not play country on repeat. She slid a whiskey toward me and said, "Tell me you are not here to forgive her." I rolled the glass until the ice clicked. "I need information. Who is she dating? Who is in the wedding party? Who owes her favors?" Marisol works at the courthouse and hears everything before it happens. She tapped her phone. Name on the marriage license is Evan Walters, some trust fund contractor from Columbus. He bought the old Miller farm to flip it. Claire met him at a real estate open house she crashed for free cheese. I laughed so hard the bartender stared. Claire always lands on her Louboutins. Marisol lowered her voice. Rumor says Evan's company is under audit for skimming materials. EPA citation last spring. If the feds freeze his assets, that wedding budget dries up faster than your Aunt Patty on communion wine. She emailed me a PDF before last call. I tipped the bartender with a 20 that had "run" written across Hamilton's face in Sharpie. Some nights you just know the universe is taking bets. Wednesday I drove to the Miller farm. The place looked like a postcard from the apocalypse. Half-stripped roof. Porta-john tipped sideways. Pallets of expensive tile shrink-wrapped against rain. Evan stood on the porch yelling into a Bluetooth headset about lumber grades. He was taller than Claire's Instagram photos suggested. Sunburn in the shape of a t-shirt, eyes the color of creek ice. I introduced myself as the twin with the earlier wedding. He laughed like guys who think charm is currency. Claire says you are being dramatic. You will work it out. I showed him the EPA notice on my phone. His smile froze. I said, cancel the wedding date, or I forward this to the Columbus Dispatch. They love a good fraud piece the week before elections. He swallowed so hard I heard it. I cannot just move a full ceremony in 3 weeks. I stepped closer, let him smell whiskey and vengeance. Figure it out, or I burn the farm down in your reputation first. I left him staring at rot he could no longer afford to hide. Thursday. Claire showed up at Dad's office where I was using the copier. She wore the white summer dress I wanted senior year. The one Mom said made me look too worldly. She twirled like we were still 7. Notice anything? She asked. I said, you are still 7 minutes late to humanity. She fake pouted, then grinned. Evan says we might move the wedding up 2 weeks. Surprise? You can have your precious Saturday after all. She hugged me before I could dodge, whispered, you lose. I watched her skip to the parking lot. Humming the song I walked down the aisle to in junior high graduation. I should have felt triumph. Instead, I felt the floor tilt. She was speeding up the timeline, taking the one weapon I thought I owned. That night, I sat on the porch swing carving my initials into the wood with a key. Deeper, deeper, until the key snapped. Dad brought lemonade and said, whatever you girls are doing, it ends before somebody gets hurt. I kissed his cheek and tasted salt. Too late, Daddy. Friday the sky turned the color of a bruise and stayed that way. I drove to Columbus and met a woman named Rita who runs a bridal alterations business above a pawn shop. I wore a hoodie and kept my ring finger bare. I showed her a photo of Claire's gown, a slinky mermaid thing she bought in Chicago. Rita recognized it instantly. Claire had already been in for hemming. I paid Rita $300 cash to accidentally misplace the dress for 48 hours. She tucked the bills into her bra and said, sisters, man. I got 4. One of them still owes me a kidney. I left feeling lighter, almost charitable. Then I passed a military surplus store and saw Josh's face on a recruitment poster in the window, all teeth and camouflage, and the lightness vanished. He was packing for war while I played dress-up games. I bought a prepaid phone and texted myself, no more toys. Time to break bones. Part 1 ends here. If you want to see how deep this grave gets, hit subscribe and ring the bell, because Part 2 drops the body. I wish I could tell you the dress stunt slowed her down. But Claire just cried on Instagram Live, collected 3,000 sympathy likes, and had Rita fired by sunset. Rita texted me a middle finger emoji and a bill for lost wages. I sent her twice the amount and wrote, consider it hazard pay for touching evil. Then I blocked her. Because loose ends become nooses if you leave them swinging. Saturday the clouds hung so low they scraped the steeple. Our childhood church smelled like the same cinnamon candles that used to make me sneeze during Christmas pageants. Claire had commandeered the fellowship hall for gown photos. With Evan, I parked behind the hearse garage because dead men tell no tales and neither do twin sisters who don't want their license plates seen. Through the stained glass gap, I watched her twirl in a backup dress, something poofy and innocent that made her look 12 again. Evan stood beside her in a rental tux, face pale as the boutonniere he kept crushing against his thigh. I dialed his number. He jumped when the phone vibrated, excused himself, slipped outside. I stepped from behind the lilac bush and showed him the new document on my screen. An anonymous tip to the IRS hotline, time-stamped for Monday morning, claiming his company skimmed payroll taxes. I said, 1 call, 1 audit, 1 frozen account, move the wedding or kiss solvency goodbye. He hissed. You're destroying your own sister. I leaned in so close I tasted his aftershave. She burned that bridge when she hijacked my calendar. Now she gets to roast. He swallowed, nodded once. Walked back inside like a man marching to his own firing squad. I left before the organist started practicing Here Comes the Bride. That night, Mom invited both of us for pot roast. The one dish Claire and I could never refuse. Dad said grace, longer than usual, asking the Lord to soften hard hearts. I kept my eyes open, staring at Claire across the table, while she fake prayed, with her lashes fluttering like moth wings. When Mom went to fetch dessert, Claire stabbed a carrot and whispered, "I know you're threatening Evan. Stop, or I tell Josh you've lost your mind." I smiled sweetly. Josh already knows I'm crazy. He married me anyway. She blinked, confused. I flashed the tiny gold band I had been wearing inside my shirt since Wednesday. We eloped at the courthouse in Nashville the morning after I left Evan in the dust. No guests, no cameras, no lace. Just us and a judge who smelled like cough drops. Claire's fork clattered against porcelain. "Mom will kill you," she breathed. I shrugged. Mom will survive. The question is, will you? Sunday I drove to the barn where we planned to hold my reception. The owner, Mr. Hess, greeted me with a shotgun, slung casual over his shoulder, because coyotes had been picking off his chickens. I showed him the double booking email. Claire's wedding planner sent by accident. He cursed. Spat tobacco, said, "I ain't hosting 2 shindigs in one day. First one to pay the balance keeps the slot." I paid the remaining $5,000 on the spot, cash I'd saved for honeymoon scuba lessons. He handed me the key like he was glad to wash his hands of bridal warfare. I texted Claire a photo of the receipt. She replied with a voice memo screaming so hard the speaker cracked. I saved it as my new ringtone. Monday the IRS thing happened anyway, just not by my hand. Turns out Evan's business. Partner got spooked and confessed everything, in exchange for immunity. Federal agents froze the accounts before lunch. Claire found out when the caterer called, demanding a replacement. Credit card that wouldn't decline. She drove to my motel, pounded on the door until the neighbor threatened to call cops. I opened wearing the robe. Mom packed for my wedding morning. Claire's mascara looked like war paint, streaking toward surrender. She screamed, "Call them off!" I said, "I didn't file the tip." "Maybe the universe just hates thieves." She lunged. I sidestepped. She crashed into the dresser, knocked over the lamp, cut her palm on broken glass. Blood dotted the carpet like tiny red confessions. I handed her a towel and said, "Careful. That stain never comes out." She stared at me then, really stared, as if seeing the older twin who finally learned to bite. She whispered, "I only wanted to beat you once." I answered, "Congratulations, you did. Now you get to live with the version of me you created." She left holding her wrist like something was broken that no doctor could set. Tuesday the sky cracked open, rain slamming sideways into anyone dumb enough to stand exposed. I sat in Dad's study, uploading the final proof of our new invitations. Same barn. New date, this Friday, casual attire, bring boots. I even used Claire's blush palette for the background because waste is a sin. Mom walked in, eyes puffy, voice trembling. "Please tell me you two can fix this." I closed the laptop. She started it sounded childish, so I said, "I'm ending it." "That's close enough," Mom cried. I hugged her, felt her bones under the sweater she knitted while we were still in her womb. She whispered, "I love you both, but you're killing each other." I said, "Only one of us dies tonight." "Mom, the other just stops pretending." Wednesday I woke to a text from an unknown number, a photo of Josh's army convoy, time-stamped 6 hours earlier, heading to an undisclosed location. The message read, "Enjoy your wedding while your husband eats sand." My stomach dropped through the floorboards. I called Josh's commander, got voicemail. I called the base, got transferred, got nothing. I sat on the motel bed, shaking so hard the mattress springs sang. Then I recognized the area code, Millfield. Claire had friends who hacked phones for sport in high school. She was pulling me into open war, using the one target I couldn't armor. I drove to her apartment, kicked the door until the frame splintered. She stood inside wearing the original mermaid gown, now altered to blood red with fabric dye, a mockery of innocence. I said, "Leave my husband out of this." She twirled. Too late. "You took my venue, my caterer, my future. I take your peace." I slapped her. She slapped back. We crashed into the coffee table, glass exploding like champagne we would never toast together. I pinned her wrists, breathing rage. "I will burn every bridge in this county." She smiled through split lip. "Good. Fire is the only thing that cleans us now. Thursday, I filed a restraining order, then learned those are just paper unless you enforce them with distance. Distance was impossible in a town the size of a grocery list. I spent the afternoon at the barn hanging cafe lights, arranging wildflowers, testing the playlist Josh and I built during late-night FaceTime calls. Every song felt like a goodbye. Mr. Hess brought his granddaughters to help. They asked why the bride looked sad. I said, because happiness costs more than I thought. They nodded like they understood, ran off to chase fireflies blooming early from the heat. I set a single empty chair near the altar, draped it with the camouflage jacket Josh wore the day he proposed. If he couldn't be here in person, he would be here in mission fabric and memory. I cried for the first time since this started. Ugly gasping tears that tasted like copper and gasoline. When I finished, the sky was black and the lights looked like captive stars. I took a selfie, sent it to Claire with the caption, "Still standing," she replied instantly. For now. Friday morning, wedding day. Sunrise the color of a healing bruise. I drove to the church to pick up Mom's cake stand, the one every bride in our family used since 1947. I found the side door open, lights off, sanctuary silent. Then I smelled smoke. I followed it downstairs to the fellowship hall and saw my wedding gown hanging from the ceiling sprinkler, flames licking up the tulle like hungry tongues. On the floor beneath it, someone had spray painted, "Till death" in the same red dye Claire wore the night before. I grabbed the fire extinguisher, yanked the pin, doused the dress until the fabric sagged, wet and dead. Sirens wailed outside. I sat on the altar steps, dress dripping sooty water across marble that used to feel holy. Fire chief said accelerant, intentional, lucky the building didn't catch. He asked who would do this. I said family. He wrote it down like he understood. I walked outside and found Claire waiting by my car, still in that red mermaid gown, eyes wild, holding a gas can. She said, "Now we match." I should have called the cops. Instead, I opened my trunk, pulled out the Barbie I kept since childhood, head reattached with super glue, legs still missing. I handed it to her. "Remember when we shared?" She stared at the toy, then at me, and something broke behind her pupils. She dropped the can, fell to her knees, sobbed like a child lost in a storm she created. I knelt, wiped her tears with the hem of my burned dress, and whispered, "We're done." Evening came anyway. Guests arrived at the barn wearing jeans and boots like the invitation said. They stared at my singed hem, at the empty chair holding a soldier's jacket, at the twin who showed up alone. I walked down the aisle between hay bales and fairy lights, violin playing a song Josh wrote on a cheap guitar in cobble sand. I said vows to the jacket, slipped the ring on my own finger, promised to love him until war or witchcraft parted us. Guests cried. Mom clutched Dad's arm like she might fall through the earth. Claire stood at the back, red dress replaced by a gray hoodie, face scrubbed raw. When the officiant asked for objections, she raised her hand, then let it fall, turned, walked into the cornfield until darkness swallowed her. Nobody followed. We partied anyway. We drank whiskey, told stories about the groom who might be somewhere in a convoy, might be watching the same moon. At midnight, I danced barefoot on splintered wood, dress ripped at the knees, feet bleeding into the grain. I felt alive, finally, like pain had scraped me clean. Week later, the police found Claire's car parked beside the old quarry. Driver's door open, tank empty, no note. They dragged the water, found nothing but shopping bags weighted with rocks. Theories flew: suicide, escape, amnesia. I said nothing. I knew my sister better than currents and limestone depths. She was somewhere breathing, plotting, waiting for the next 7 minutes to matter. I mailed her invitation to the quarry address. Wrote across the back, "You win the silence you wanted. Enjoy the echo." Josh came home safe, metals and dust lining his duffel. We kissed until our lips cracked, moved to Tennessee, planted tomatoes that taste like forgiveness if you add enough salt. Every year on the anniversary, I get a postcard with no return address. Postmark from a different state. Always blank except a single red fingerprint. I press them into a scrapbook labeled regret. Store it on the highest shelf beside the Barbie whose legs I never found. Some nights I dream I hear twin heartbeats under the floorboards. I wake, touch Josh's warm back, remind myself fire only takes what you feed it. I stopped feeding, but I keep the gasoline can in the barn, just in case. After all, you never know how far you can push someone before the nice girl everyone knows cracks right down the middle and never comes back together. I already know the answer. farther than you think, and closer than you ever want to see. If this story scraped your heart, hit subscribe and share your own echo in the comments. Sometimes the only way out is through. And sometimes through leaves you standing in a field of ash that used to be family. Stay safe, stay kind, and never underestimate the quiet ones.